11, go.
Meghan, open the case.
This video is a study in how people like Meghan refuse to hold themselves accountable and pretend to be victims. You can use this video to be able to recognize these unreliable people in your own life. Just when we thought Meghan couldn't play victim anymore, she goes on to prove us wrong. What we're about to see makes her UN speech sound riveting and reliable. Click the like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I analyze the language of criminals and media personalities, so I often end up analyzing the same people. Let's get to work. She says she had a short stint as a briefcase girl. Looking at the subsequent context, this adjective helps underline that it wasn't something she thought of doing long term, that she had better things to do, allegedly. That's why she's quick to remind us of her quote-unquote intelligent jobs as an intern at an embassy, which she doesn't detail. However, according to Meghan, these jobs valued her specifically for her brain. And as she kindly taught us in her interview with Variety, she was the smart one. She also makes sure to remind us that she had studied acting at a university, again connoting intelligence or perceived intelligence. Because as I showed in this video, even being a college professor doesn't require intelligence anymore. Wonderful news. She goes on to say that Deal or No Deal wasn't about acting, which begs the question, why bring up acting classes? Thus, the mention of acting classes is likewise revealed to be self-serving information. Also, I don't completely believe that it wasn't about acting. I mean, are we supposed to believe that these are real reactions? Meghan's so embarrassed about this job that she feels the need to share her resume with us. From things she studied to jobs she had, to the presupposition that she has a brain worth praising. Not everybody does, that's why it's a presupposition. Meghan's so focused on persuading that she uses commanding language. She says, you have to imagine just to paint the picture for you. Not that we had any doubt that Meghan would be thoughtful enough to paint the picture for us. By the way, she's no stranger to commanding language.
And it's an immense change. You're getting a new country out of it, a husband obviously, but also giving up your
nice.
career.
This is nice. Yes. But I don't see it as giving anything up. I just see it as a change.
It's a new challenge. It's a new
chapter, right? And also keep in mind, I've been working on my show for 7 years. So we were very, very fortunate to be able to have that sort of longevity on a series. And for me, once we hit the 100 episode marker, I thought, you know what, I have ticked this box and I feel really proud of the work I've done there. And now it's time to, as you said, work as a team with you. Yeah.
And she likes drawing the conclusions for the audience. Hence, it makes sense that she says that she'll paint the picture. As I've analyzed in previous videos, she does this quite a lot in interviews and speeches. 2 examples.
So for both of us, it was just a really authentic and organic way to get to know each other.
It was at that moment that I realized the magnitude of my actions at the age of 11.
She then goes on to talk about the lashes they had to put on and that they were even given spray tan vouchers each week. As an adverb, even refers to something unexpected or extreme, even. Along with the other details, it's meant to portray the briefcase holders as a collective rather than individuals, which the expression cookie cutter idea also underlines. It's meant to slightly offend us, even though it's part of the show. She knew exactly what she went into, and it's common to focus on beauty in the entertainment industry. News and talk show hosts and participants are expected to have certain haircuts and have on certain clothes. It's not like Meghan experienced anything out of the ordinary. It would be better to just state the obvious. I regret being part of it, and I don't like this part of my past because it flies in the face of the image I want to have. But honesty can be a tricky thing.
And so the only thing that I had asked her when she said she wanted to set us up was, I had one question. I said, well, is he nice?
She says, when I look back at that time, which refers back to the initial words back in 2006, again underlining the perspective, Meghan looking back on her 25-year-old self. It's sensitive to her to make it sound like a long time ago. Next, she goes for a dramatic effect as she says, I will never, then performs self-repair, which is when speakers are looking for the best words to use. And then she says she'll never forget this one detail. She makes it sound like a traumatic experience. But what does this trauma consist of? It consists of one of the showrunners calling her name, which she couldn't probably pronounce as Meghan phrases it. Linguistically, she gives more weight to the horror of having someone mispronounce her last name than what the showrunner told her to do. Also, again, there's nothing special about what the showrunner told her to do. This is something that almost anyone who's on camera has to put up with. She makes sure to emphasize that she quit the show, that she made the decision. She then appeals to women as a collective, saying that she was surrounded by smart women on that stage, but that being smart wasn't the focus of why they were there. She makes this sound like a complaint, that because you're smart it's sad, or a shame that intelligent isn't the focus. However, this would imply that everything people do should match their perceived talents. But perceived talents in one area don't necessitate or warrant that they should be applied in every area. If I'm good at playing piano and I'm working at an assembly line in a factory, it doesn't mean that I should be playing piano at the assembly line. It's not part of the job description. Thus, Meghan's complaint is about as convincing as this overlooked performance from a great movie.
They betrayed me, they didn't keep their promise, they tricked me and I don't care anymore. You know what they say, love is blind.
It says way more about her sense of self-importance than about her feelings being relatable. Next, it's time for the inevitable passive sentence construction, a way of avoiding agency and thus responsibility. She praises herself by saying that she was so much more than what was being objectified on the stage. Never mind that every single host, actor and actress could say the same. Many celebrities do this, say a buzzword like objectified and let people's connotations do the rest. Meghan's full of buzzwords and new management terms. They don't mean an awful lot, to put it mildly, and that's the point.
For me, it's very important to, once you hit the ground running, even if you're doing it quietly behind the scenes, which is what I've focused my energy on thus far, is meeting with the right people, meeting with the right organizations behind the scenes quietly, learning as much as I can so that I can maximize the opportunity we have here to really make an impact. I think women don't need to find a voice. They have a voice, they need to feel empowered to use it, and people need to be encouraged to listen. And I certainly know how passionate I am, and Harry and I see the world so similarly in our approach of being very hands-on with things. And just as a sidebar, earlier this afternoon we sat down with a few of you delegates, and it was incredibly inspiring, the resounding themes that came up about representation, about inclusion, about access, and about trying to shift the global perspective for all of us as a global community. And this week the world is watching as you cement your place in history by showcasing the good that you are doing today, in the present moment, as we embrace the moment of now to create a better tomorrow.
Many people feel convinced when they've heard positive words, making them forget the lack of substance. That's why headlines are so effective. She then says she didn't like feeling forced to be all looks and little substance, being reduced to this specific archetype. Strange use of the word, by the way. She wasn't forced, still she has no problem making it sound like she was, which should make us question the validity of just about everything she says. And the passive construction, being reduced, resurfaces, as if she had no part in it. This is manipulation and an unreliable, if not deceptive, account. Also, again, according to this logic, how many people would go home from work every day feeling sad that they didn't use all their talents? Also, the elephant in the room. If she felt this bad, she herself has now debunked her claim that acting wasn't involved, because she didn't exactly look sad on stage. Let's revisit the heartwarming clips. The problem with this entire podcast is that it's devoid of agency. Every bad thing any guest has ever experienced is because of someone or something else, when the truth is they have created these so-called archetypes themselves. To call it fake victim role playing is an understatement of astronomical proportions. That's why it's hard to take it seriously when Meghan introduces Paris Hilton, saying that Paris is now defining herself on her own terms, after she just finished saying that Paris built an entire brand out of being dumb. By inference, then, Paris has always defined herself on her own terms. It's just that now she's older and not as popular, so she needs a new image. And like Meghan, she's no stranger to self-praise. Paris says she's kind, has a big heart, and that she's an Aquarius. This last vital piece of information isn't a personal characteristic, but something she's born as, allegedly, of course. There seems to be a conflation of the two. Not that it matters in this intelligent discussion. This entire podcast is a way for Meghan to project her life and opinions onto her guests. As she said, she knows about different labels herself, the labels she supposedly wants to change. In previous videos, I've pointed to this projection in her interview with Serena Williams. In this interview, this observation is best exemplified by this passage. Meghan claims that it makes her sad that Paris allegedly doesn't get the opportunity to think about the woman that she wants to be with a blank slate and being cast in a show that she ends up feeling trapped in. This is exactly what Meghan has felt like, supposedly, that people won't let her start with a blank slate and that she's had roles she's felt trapped in, from Deal or No Deal to Suits.
No, she's trying to be a lawyer, and I hope that she can be that at some point, but for now, no, the lowly paralegal.
To the royal family. Both Meghan and Paris willingly overlook that actions have consequences. Certain statements and behavior result in a certain image. So no one has a blank slate, not even poor duchesses and heiresses. Another thing worth noting, albeit unsurprising, is the double standards of this podcast. Presumably, it's about breaking down barriers, archetypes, and redefining beauty. However, when the self-proclaimed comedian Iliza joins the enjoyable conversation, the podcast takes a different turn. Iliza humble brags, saying that the ugliest men called her hot when she started doing comedy, but that she allegedly didn't care about it. I'm still not going to sleep with you, as she says. Humble brag is a seemingly critical statement used to highlight one's achievements, or in this case, appearance. It's a way of saying, look at me, I'm desired, in a perceived acceptable way. It's funny that the words ugliest men are said unapologetically, considering how politically correct, aka unreliable, this podcast is supposed to be. If two men had called Meghan or Iliza or anyone else ugly, it's very likely that the consequences would have been drastic. The host and guest could have been made to apologize, or Spotify could have flat out dropped the contract. All Meghan does is thank Iliza for making her feel a certain way. She often or always puts her feelings in the forefront, no matter how other people feel. The Oprah interview taught us that. What makes the situation unintentionally funnier is that Iliza goes on to talk about the importance of not shaming any body types, after she's just identified certain people as ugly. The irony is quite hilarious. Overall, and this is just my opinion based on many observations I've made, I think this should make us question practically all self-proclaimed activists, one of the most overused words currently. Quite often it seems like these activists' words about the common good are really about themselves, how they want to be perceived and accepted no matter how they've behaved in the past, so that they can continue with this behavior in the future without having people judge them. Another word these same people like to use. After saying how smart she is, a point she likes to bring up so often that, ironically, we should question its validity, Meghan goes on to talk about a guy, Chris, who wouldn't look her way. If you can believe that. This makes Iliza say, "Yeah, you hear that, Chris? Now what? I'm sipping on iced coffee in an underground studio with the Duchess. Where are you?" Showing how much she's matured, first of all, and secondly, showing how much status means to her. And maybe even just a tad more than Meghan as a person, as unimaginable as that is. Meghan still sounds bothered that she couldn't get Chris to look her way, and she conveniently links it to feeling that she wasn't pretty enough. She has no way of knowing if this was in fact the case, or if Chris just didn't appreciate her complex personality. But as long as it fits the purposes of the podcast, I guess. Finally, let's think about this logically, even though, paradoxically, it's better to hear and read this podcast without thinking. Chris didn't look in her direction, so he must have been looking in other girls' direction. That's the implication. Why? Because they were prettier than Meghan. So implicitly, without saying it, Meghan puts the girls he looked at in a box, in an archetype, you might say, of classic beauty or whatever you want to call it. It seems that Meghan divides people into archetypes herself. But as with anything else related to this podcast, let's not think about it. However, one final remark, if I may. May I?
Absolutely.
Thank you. In my opinion, the conclusions we can draw from this interview make Meghan's speech at the One Young World Summit sound authentic and selfless, as the agenda-filled and totally necessary organization itself.
It was several years ago, in 2014, that I was first invited to be a counselor at One Young World. Young, ambitious, advocating for the things I deeply and profoundly believed in. Have any of you today so far had that feeling, that pinch me moment where you just go, how am I here? Oh, it's a lot. And I was surrounded by world leaders, humanitarians, prime ministers, and activists that I had such a deep and long-standing respect and admiration for. And I was invited to pull up a seat at the table, proof that I belonged. My life had changed rather significantly. I was now married, and I was now a mom.
This was a tough one, and now it's time for a well-deserved break for all of us.